5, 4.
It's now September 5th, 2003, and not much visible has occurred since the last time we reviewed the work here in Courtroom 1. Following the installation of the steel beams, most of the work has occurred in the ceiling of the courtroom with the installation of heating, air conditioning, electronics, and all of the prep work that's necessary before the ceiling could be installed. In addition, the metal ceiling, which is prepared for the lath to be applied to it, has now been started and is near completion. Following that, of course, the wire lath will be applied to the stringers and the plaster installed on the lath. That will then allow for the installation of the wood frames that will be installed on the ceiling. That work of the installation of the wood frames has been completed on the walls, as we can see.
Five, 4.
You may have noticed that the area behind me and on the walls is covered with plastic. That's been installed to protect it during the construction process that's ongoing in the ceiling. But there is visible within the behind the plastic the frames that exist both above and below the molding. So there's a smaller frame below throughout the courtroom. The painting on the walls now is just the priming, and within the frame below there will be a different color. Above, within the frame, there will be scrolling that will go up for the full length of the frame and full around the perimeter of the frame inside, and then inside that will be the installation of the Victorian sconces, which will match to the chandeliers that will be hung in the four corners of the courtroom. Now, frames similar to this but larger will be placed on the ceiling in each quadrant of the ceiling being divided into 4 areas with large frames virtually identical to what we have here, and inside the middle of those larger frames the 4 chandeliers will be hung. When that is completed, of course, we still have the installation of the flooring, the pews, the completion of the bench, which is now structurally completed and has been substantially completed in terms of its finish, except for the installation of frames or molding on the bench as well. Then we also need to complete the railing, which will replace the railing that used to be located in front of the bench, and that will be a replica of the original railing we know existed before the fire in 1929. Also left to be completed, of course, is the area outside of the courtroom, which consists of the sitting area and the handicap bathroom and the foyer area. That is pretty much completed except for the cosmetic work that has to be done there. The doors, the original doors of the courtroom, are presently off their hinges and in the workshop of the Building and Grounds. They've completely restored them, saving the special glass that is in there, and they are now in the process of staining and finishing them so that they can be reinstalled when we are ready.
5, 4.
As you may have noticed, the walls are covered by a heavy plastic, which makes it difficult to clearly see the framing that is on the walls within the courtroom. The area within the Grecian bend, not covered but in the same manner. The frames are installed above and below the chair rail, a large frame going the height pretty much of the area above the chair rail to the ceiling, and below the chair rail a smaller frame. The walls have been primed but not painted in their final color, so that within the lower frame, for example, there will be a different color than the area right above the lower frame, and the color above the molding here will be in a different color than that below the molding. Within the larger frame, there will be a scrolling or striping which will attempt to reproduce what was there before the fire in 1929, and within that striping area there is a sconce on each of the or in each of the frames throughout the courtroom, and then the similar frames will then go on the ceiling. They will be larger, and the ceiling will be divided into 4 quadrants, and within those quadrants a chandelier which will again reproduce the 4 chandeliers that were hung in the courtroom, and their location will be located. So in each quadrant a chandelier will hang from the middle of the frame area in essentially the same location that the original chandeliers were hung. The bench has been completed except for the trim that be placed on the bench. There is a framing or molding to be placed there so as to give a raised paneled effect. The doors to the courtroom have been removed and refinished by the building and grounds crew. There was a lot of work to be done on them in order to save the doors, and we managed to do it so that the beveled glass which is in there, which was original, is still there. And the area outside of the doors in the foyer is prepared now for its finishing. The area which will be a sitting room, the foyer area, and then a handicapped bathroom have essentially been prepared for paint and staining and all of the finish work. We're yet to approach the problem of the outside banister and railing, which has become quite a task. Inside, I failed to mention that the original rail was removed, and we will be building a replica rail in a cherry finish to match the rest of the finish throughout the courtroom.
Okay.
See, that shows it up. I don't know if you could get the ceiling in here.
Sure. And 5, 4.
One last thing we can look at, although it's not too visible in light of this structure that's in our way, is the jury room area. The ceiling, the plaster ceiling here has been completed, except for the installation of a frame which will match the frames that are on the walls and will be on the ceiling in the courtroom. A chandelier will be dropped here in the middle of this frame as well. Also partially visible here, perhaps, are the special bookcases or display cases that we've installed at the west wall of the jury room, which will contain historical memorabilia, both for the court and the bar. And also partially visible are the window frames. You'll see that the frames have all been stripped so that they're prepared for staining. The windows here and throughout the courtroom and the foyer throughout the facility were removed and restored, some of them in some pretty old condition, and they've been placed back in good condition and are now made usable. Many of them, or most of them, were not able to be opened. We now have a brass chain with a weight which will allow us to open the windows as they were open initially. Does that work underneath?
Let's see if we get some windows.
Man, where they put that, make no effort to hire the fire thing either.
What's
You
that?
tell me when you're ready. The fire alarm thing. Look where they put it.
Okay, I think we've got you good here. Okay, so it's October.
And we're going to be basically saying they have now completed the wire mesh for the wire. There's another word for it.
Left.
The metal lath for the ceiling, and are in the process now of applying the first coat of plastic.
Okay, let me give you your countdown here. Ready? And 5, 4, 3.
It is now October 8th, and the workmen have now completed the installation of the metal lath for the ceiling, and are also in the process now of doing the first coat of plaster. The ceiling will be 3 coats of plaster, the initial base coat, a brown coat, and then a finish coat. They are approximately, as you can see, a quarter way through the ceiling.
Okay, and let me just get a shot up there of that. Okay.
I wonder what that noise is.
Is anybody still working here out in the other room? It certainly sounds like it does